G'day everybody. I've got a question for some of you guys, especially people who are into permaculture and gardening, hobby farming, etc. And I don't seem to have any photos. I seem to have wiped them out now of the property I'm buying up near Rockhampton. It's very overgrown. It's an abandoned property for those who haven't seen it. I'm going to try and recover some images somehow, but for those of you who have seen it, I might even post a link to the property, the videos I've made. Could that be considered a cover crop? All of that overburden or overgrown yard, essentially. Could I just chip that down, cut it down, and then use that as mulch or compost, so to speak, as a beginning, instead of getting machinery in there and cleaning the block? Is it more beneficial that I use it to my advantage? And with the wet seasons that we're having, the sun, the cooler conditions, am I better off getting in there, chopping the long stuff down and leaving it alive as a cover crop, using the stuff on top as mulch? Or do I pile it and make compost heaps, add worms, etc., and add more organic matter? And do I make steps towards making that my little farm? Now, I'm certainly no expert. I'm not going to be I know homestead is the wrong term. I'm just an urban dweller, as much as I hate that thought. But I am just a suburban fella with ambitions to have a cleaner living, less environmental impact, with overtones of wanting to become self-sufficient. But I know I probably will never achieve being 100% off-grid, 100% self-sufficient. I'll use what I have, but I do have town water and I do have power, so I may as well use it. But I'd like to remove myself as much as possible from that. I want to make steps towards a permaculture sort of little property. It's just over half an acre, so I think there's potential there to have enough room to supply myself and my missus, maybe some neighbours and friends, and then put some back into the ground for the next crop, or the next season, or next rotation, whatever the right terminology is. So I want to engage with more people, and and I'm really loving the comments. I'm really loving all the advice people are giving me. Whether I take it or don't, I still really appreciate it. I will use what I can. It gives, even if I'm not using it 100%, what it does do is all these ideas and suggestions people make, some of those are keywords, some of those are thought processes that I've never used before, and then that allows me to go searching further on down. So whether that's flood mitigation work, whether that's termite damage, whether that's how I should go about building gardens, getting my lawn back. I don't believe I want to have a manicured lawn. Some of you have seen the photos from the Google Street Views. It's beautiful, nice garden. I don't believe I want to have a lawn that I have to have an expensive zero-turn mower, ride-on mower, etc., that needs to be mown a lot. That brings in lots of costs. You've got to outlay the cost of the outlay of a zero-turn, because if I do get these two properties, I'm going to have over an acre at two different locations, an hour apart. So that means I'd have to transport ride-on mowers from one place to the other, but we will be travelling to and from, so it's not out of the question to do that. But if I can get away with not having a $10,000 ish lawnmower, and I don't have to rely on fuel all the time, maintenance all the time, etc., etc. If I can maybe hit the overgrown properties once in the beginning of their lives and then maintain it, that is my ultimate goal. The less work I have to do, the better. Not aiming too big, not aiming to have a full-on farm in my very first season. I know that's not a reality. Starting small and then growing, and also taking into account, which one of the guys whose videos I've seen recently was saying that if you're trying to, we'll just throw a number of, say, 20,000 calories. If you wanted to grow 20,000 calories worth of food, it makes no sense to use 30,000 calories of energy to get that food. So I want to try and use as much of Mother Nature and the land, what it provides, to my advantage. And I will just put slight little inputs here and there. I think that's what without being a permaculture farmer, trying to sustain myself at 100%. I'm just trying to be realistic and do the least amount of work possible and let Mother Nature do the rest. Also taking into account in that, knowing that where I am buying, I do have in one of the properties, which will be the first property that I'll move into, that does suffer from flash flooding. Pretty violent flash flooding. The water, it doesn't seem to be very deep. It only seems to get around that 600 millimeters high, 2 feet for my other mates overseas. But it comes through with enough velocity that it washed away the previous owner's beautiful greenhouse. And now, after reflecting the damage to the gates on the house and the damage to the lattice work on the house underneath, I believe that may have happened during the last previous floods back in 2000. It was either around 2015, 2016. They got 3 floods in 1 year, and I believe the previous owners were just too old to get the property back to how it was. I think they were just too old, too fragile. It just wasn't. They just weren't physically able to bring the property back to how it was, and I think the property's just gone downhill, and they've passed away, and that's how the property's ended up how it's got to. So I may add some photos of how it used to be, and you can actually see that it is quite a large yard to mow, but I don't really want to have to get it back to that standard where I need a $10,000 mower. Ongoing fuel, maintenance on the machine itself, changing blades, changing belts and drive systems, and having broken down bits and pieces and hauling it to and from 2 different properties. So I'm trying to go the way of the least amount of machineries and combustion engines as possible. So that's why I'm sort of looking at the good old chip and hoe. I don't know what the real name for this is, but I did work on a farm when I was 15 years old for about 3 months, and we called these things chipping hoes. So around the cauliflower and lettuce, we used to have to chip away the weeds probably at least once a week. A couple of us would get sent out on chipping missions, they were called. And I bought this thing for $2 at a markets. And same with a lot of my hand tools. I bought, I used to go to markets and garage sales and try and pick up whatever cheap old school tools there were. That was just sort of my hobby. I accumulated them, but then I've had to move house a number of times. Mrs. hated me having all of this stuff. I've always got too much stuff. Well, now I'm buying my own land. I've got plenty of stuff plenty of room to hoard, and I don't mind hoarding these old tools. So I'm going to have a crack, and some of the people will realise that, you know, I've got a video about knives and I've got videos about knives, camping and survival equipment, etc., etc., and I've got machetes and I've got yard tools. So I want to try and do as much as I can with those tools that I already have. I think that would be counterproductive to have videos about this silky saw or this machete or this Japanese digging knife, etc., etc., and not using those things. So I'm really watching videos about scythes again, sickles. I've got hand shears, and there is some hand tools at the property. So I want to make use of those, put a bit of human power into it, a bit of elbow grease, and just see what I can do with the property. Obviously trim back some of the trees, and but hopefully not dump as much of that potential compost or fertilizer as I can. That's the plan. I'm just going to turn the video around, and I'm just going to show you how effective these chipping hoes can be, and these tools of old and forgotten times, how useful they are. Yes, I've used a little bit of sprays and poisons, and that it didn't really work. But having a mate who's a gardener / lawn mower dude, yard maintenance fella, he heavily relies on his power tool. So if I ask for advice, it's power tool this, best quality that, best poisons, don't worry about everything else. But I do understand he lives in suburbia and he's trying to make as much money as possible per hour. That's good business sense for him. But I just pulled this chipping hoe out of my shed just before, and within 5 minutes, maybe 7, absolutely max, I was surprised with how much work that I achieved in the garden, you know, just by attacking the roots of the weeds and the grass and all that sort of stuff. These things are so efficient, you know. So I'm going to do a dump run today, because I am moving from this house, and I've got to clean up anyway. So I thought, well, I'll just test out what hand tools I have. Half of them are already in Rockhampton in storage. So yeah, bring on the advice, please. Do I use the overgrown place as a cover crop? Do I use as much of it as I can as compost? And please tell me, what's the difference between fresh new green cuttings and wastage, green grass, green leaves, etc., and the brown? When it's green, does that are you depositing nitrogen, and then is the dead when it's brown leaves, is that now carbon? I think there's something along those lines. Okay, thank you.